श्री चिन्मय सद्गुरुवे नमः। ओम श्री स्वामी तपोवन महाराजाय नमः। Ishavasyopanishad discourses by Param Poojya Gurudev Swami Chinmayananda ji. Letter to seekers. Dear seeker, Shivoham, Shivoham. Scriptures are not merely books for intellectual studies. We must learn to assimilate these ideas and come to live them. In this process alone can we gain the experience of the nobler in ourselves. By thus realizing the truth in us, we can open up a few windows in our own personality to bring more light unto us, and will be a source of joy, cheer, and happiness for others to draw their inspirations from us. By improving yourself, improve the world, thy own self. Om Chinmayananda. Except for some insensible, fanatical, and faith-blind people, very few of us can at the outset imagine today that religion is as acceptable as science, or is at least scientific, or that it has any function at all with life as such. If by religion we mean the mad fanaticism and ignoble strife that we observe in the day's vitiated atmosphere beneath steeples, gopurams, or domes, then it is only too true to declare that religion can provide us only with plenty of chances to confuse and confound our issues in life. Unintelligent and blind followers have made the best of philosophies serve as lifeless prescriptions for ritualism. Without its true stamina and vital dynamism, religion has become today, in the hands of a few, an inhuman engine to demoralize the generation and to feed it with false sentiments, superstitious fears, and strife breeding fanaticism. But then, is true religion a superstition, or is it a science? Is religion a ghastly conspiracy or a message of peace? Is God seeking a foul deceit or a call of love? Are the words of prophets a poison or an elixir? Is a life of love and charity a dope or a tonic? In fact, it is to inquire into these and to come to at least a definite intellectual understanding of these that we have today met here in this Jnana Yajna. Here we shall be going into the details of the entire import and the implication of the Bible of the Hindus called the Upanishads. In this 21 days study session, we will be going through the Ishavasyopanishad stanza by stanza in all detail. We shall be going into the textbook without fear or favor, in a clear and simple attitude of research and understanding. These are days when many a doubtful question arises in the minds of the educated regarding religion and scriptures. In our preoccupation with life, we have neither the time nor the patience to see if the authors of the sources or the sources of the scriptures, be they prophets or gods of God men, or mere mortal philosophers have anything to give us to help us in leading a better life. In every club veranda, public meetings, university libraries, and such places of learning and discussions, we nowadays often discover sincere heart searching and burning questions. Are the scriptures to be scraped? Should the scriptures survive? Can the scriptures serve? We hope to try and come to a definite reply to all these questions by a thorough research into the thoughts and their implications as suggested in one of the sacred textbooks, the Ishavasyopanishad. During these days of the yajna, these are the summaries of the extempore discourses given by Swamiji that we have in the text. A session of such inspired discourses delivered daily at a fixed time in a given city or town, wherein all listeners have their textbooks in hand and take down their own notes, is called a Jnana Yajna. I should respect all of you not to consider me as a special creature with special powers of dignities. I am no guru, nor are you my disciples. We both are fellow students in the halls of wisdom, trying together to make a brotherly research into the great wisdom of the Rishis. At best, we are only equal and sincere seekers trying to do the pilgrimage together in a spirit of loving brotherhood and friendly companionship. Before we enter into the main textbook, it is certainly necessary that we should know some of the fundamental thoughts of the Rishis. Let us presume that religion has a great message to the world and that it is quite scientific. This is only a presumption. In our research, if we were to discover that this is not true, we shall declare to the world our findings. If we, on the other hand, by sheer accident come to discover that in religion there is a scientific treatment of life and its values, let us then try to live those nobler values and come to declare to the world the real meaning of true religion. The Jnana is thus a movement of renaissance rather than an attempt at creating a sect of compromisers trying to build up a limited cocoon to bury themselves in. We shall, in the first 3 days, go into these general definitions which are absolutely necessary in understanding the chosen text, and thereafter plunge into ourselves into the main textbook itself. Since science and religion. When we watch the motives behind science and religion, we clearly see that both of them have almost something very similar and common between them. Both of them have been striving sincerely to serve the state or the generation with the maximum quota of happiness in life, with all their crudities and imperfections. We must admit that all religions of the world had served their own immediate generations, at least during their heyday. Later on, those societies developed into new patterns, and in the context of the more and more complicated scheme of things available in life, the same old religion might not have come to serve these overdeveloped societies in all their varied activities and departments of existence as efficiently as before. Similarly, in the case of science, also we find that its anxiety is to discover means and methods by which its own generation can be more and more redeemed from the clutches that we have pointed out about religion is equally applicable to science also. The discovery of the plough, for example, was one of the greatest blessings that science had then achieved for man. But today, when the world is teeming with its overpopulated millions, the same old plough is no more an efficient blessing, and the modern scientists have had to discover the tractors and the fertilizers. Similarly, a ritualistic religion of a past era, which must have served the members of the society at that time, may not be so efficiently serve the needs of and demands of the present generation. But all the same, we must admit that the motives of both religion and science have been to serve the generation of the state. Time passed on from tribal organizations to communal living, national aspirations, and international tussles. With all their power blocks and maladjustments, man in numbers grew both in the complexity of their organizations and in the variety of their demands. In this momentous rush of history along the corridors of time, the state started its pilgrimage with religion as its spouse, but somewhere about the Ages, with the dawn of the age of machines, a brilliant maiden science joined the company, certainly with the same sacred motive of serving the state. But the old Ma religion, disgusted, jealous, and almost exasperated, stayed behind, and science kept pace with the moving world. Today, therefore, we find that religion is still lingering in the portals of churches, mosques, and temples, while the generation with atom in hand has walked in and through parliaments seeking new friends of conquest in the outer world, and for all their sweat and toil, winning only fresh fields of carping sorrows in the inner world. Satiated with its own empty seekings, throttled in all its hopes of peace and quietude, exhausted and weary, the poor old world is today, with regret and despair, looking back at its aged spouse, religion, expecting some kind of rest and peace in her lap. But alas, even that ancient religion is nowhere in the vicinity. Far away, religion stands as a speck in the far off distance, which has dwindled to almost nothingness because distance which has because of the width of the yawning gulf between the old and the new. It is this unbridgeable gulf that has really estranged us from the glorious contents of true religion. If at all nowadays some members of our generation make bold dash to reach the goal of religion, they invariably miss their aim and reach only the impoverished religion of the Middle Ages, which itself had by then gathered endless decadence and consequent inefficiency into its fold. After that timeless age of Vyasa, religion seems to have never moved forward in our country, and if at all it was ever vital, it was expressing its vitality only in gathering more and more superstitions and alien thoughts into its own folds. Our attempt is to find out the true religion in all its purity directly from the source, the very source which inspired the Puranas. Perhaps we may be rewarded, perhaps not. I hope you will take this gamble and accompany me into the labyrinths, labyrinths, labyrinths of the ancient wisdom, all in a spirit of seeking an adventure. Sans faith, sans prejudice. I have had, to an extent some occasion to study the Upanishads in their original. I must admit that I did not bring into my studies even a trace of faith in their sacredness, nor did I care to entertain any prejudice against them. With an open mind, I reached their portals, expecting nothing, hoping nothing. I studied and lived their truth more as a seeker than as a believer, and I feel confident that in my rambles I have discovered some aspects of the great rishis, their ways of thinking, their mental attitude, and their method of approach to the problems of life. I can almost assure you that so far no greater scientists had ever come to work in the world of science, at once so sincere and rational as these great scientists who dealt with life as such and recorded their observations in their truth declarations. Just as to the scientists the world of objects provided the field of inquiry, so also to the rishis life as such presented itself as their theme for investigation and study. Supposing a scientist feels sentimental attachment to the sample of common salt in his test tube, surely he cannot thereafter do much of an investigation and discover the composition of sodium chloride. He would neither burn it nor dissolve it. Similarly, if we are to maintain a sentimental attachment to life as such, it would generate a host of false values in us. It would distort and dim our vision of the whole. Therefore, the great rishis of old, as true investigators of life as such, developed in themselves almost a superhuman detachment from life and remaining, as it were, far from the maddening crowd of ignoble strife. They observed the entire life as theme of their intense and thorough research and study. As a result of their observations, they came to certain fundamental conclusions which we must try to understand before we enter the text proper. Their first attempt was to find out the nature and functions of life as available at the various levels of existence and to come to a common definition of life. After very careful observation, they came to declare that life is a series of continuous and unbroken experiences. Thus, the life of an animal is a sum total of its feelings, just as the life of any man is determined by the sum total of his experiences. If thus the unit of life be the individual experience, and the total life be the sum total of all experiences, then a successful life is that in which the individual can have a larger number of successful and happy experiences. A life of failure is therefore that in which the majority of experiences are sorrow, unit of life. Naturally, the great scientists of life, goaded and encouraged by their observations, adventured forth with more and more daring to dissect and discover the constituents of even the unit of life called the experience, just as in recent times the unit of substance, the atom, has been ticked to smile and expose its contents. So too these great doctors of subjective investigations brought their single pointed intellect to observe the contents of the unitary experience. These close observations disclosed that no experience in life is possible without its fundamental triple factors, namely the experiencer, the experienced, and a set of relationship that is to be maintained between the experiencer and the experienced, called the experiencing. Unless these three factors function in the same given field of time and space, no experience can ever come to pass. The scientists of the modern days are also, certainly in their own way, great investigators of the ultimate truth, but their field of inquiry is constituted of the world of objects or the experienced. On the contrary, the great rishis of old, the scientists of the inner world, sought the ultimate truth in an analysis of the experiencer or the world of the subject. Thus, both being scientists, the only distinction between them is only their fields of inquiry and in the method of their respective sciences. And you will find that the ancient methods of the rishis were certainly much more perfect than the modern methods of the scientists of our own times. In fact, in the 18th century, we could not have made such a strong statement, but today we can make it because, with the breakup of the atom and the consequent discovery of its contents to be nothing but electric charges in motion, even the great scientists of the era, Eddington, have started declaring that physics can hereafter develop only by a thorough investigation into the structure, nature, and behavior of the mind. The masters of the Upanishads, however, adopted a totally different approach to the entire problem. The world of objects can be brought under five main headings: forms, sounds, smells, tastes, and touches. Besides this, we know nothing of this the world outside, and all the sciences deal with only these. As it were, the observer in us looks on to a world of variegated names and forms through five miniature peep windows, each limited in scope and giving us only a partial viewpoint of the world. The reports thus gained by the mind from its five observation posts are together assimilated to form a full report of the so called world outside. The tireless thinkers, unless there be within us an intelligent, conscious principle that can carefully cognize these The world outside has in itself no meaning or purpose. The tireless thinkers in the Vedic period, in their superhuman daring, flew yet higher to conclude through convincing logical agreements that the world outside is but a projection of the active mind. Thus, with exquisite intelligence and unerring consistency of thinking, in their superhuman logic, the great rishis came to recognize the sovereignty of the experiencer over the experienced and the experiencing. The object and the subject object relationship both have an existence and function only when they are presided over by the conscious principle. The subject. Therefore, they started an investigation into the nature, constitution, and function of the subject and its world. Not only the European readers of Hinduism, but even the haphazard pundits of India do criticize now and then the introvert nature of the Hindu philosophy. Both the gods and priests live in the East, looking into themselves, neglectful of the external world of happenings. Little do they know that they are criticizing not Vedanta as preached in the original texts of the scripture, but as it is now available in these days of utter Hindu decadence. Today, the same vital principles have become a glorious excuse for an incompetent and sluggardly generation to rot itself into the filthy mire of impotence and idleness. Never did Vedanta preach such a life of inactivity, either tacitly or explicitly. This is only an instance of Satan reading the Bible for his own convenience, and an ineffectual generation of dull lotus eaters have found it convenient to tar the face of brilliant Vedanta by their deliberate misinterpretations of the wonderful wondrous life of perfect activity declared and advocated by the Vedic philosophy. The personalities. Let us come back to the present theme. If the subject be thus of the utmost importance, any scientific inquiry into life must necessarily be inferred through an investigation into the subject. Thus, when they inquired, they found that each one of us is not in fact behaving as though we are a composite whole, but as if we are a multi headed entity. Within each one of us is functioning, as it were, three or four distinct personalities, though biologically a single being. Within it, telescoped as it were, are the four main aspects, each asserting its maximum to express itself as though each is a distinctly different entity. Thus, in an individual, there are the physical, the mental, the intellectual and the spiritual personalities, each having its own world of values, ruminating over its own thoughts, desires, and emotions, reveling in its own ideas and ideologies, and consistently trying its best to break its sense of shackles and escape into a greater, nameless freedom, peace, and joy. And all these commotions happen at one and the same time in one and the same bosom, and such an one is considered to be is considered in the political and economic field as a citizen. Thus, each one of us is a hornet's nest, breeding thousands of stinging desires within, each registering the demands of one or the other of the faces of ourselves. In order to slave for all these demands, the poor man has, alas, but a pair of legs and hands, struggling and striving to earn, procure, hoard, to cook, consume, and digest this physical structure, hapless slave to the domineering personalities, the intellectual and the spiritual gets itself shattered ere it comes to its middle age, and all of us and all its living years are wasted, not only a waste for itself, but a devastating waste to others. This condition of life in which the present era has come to live has been applauded as the golden age of the competitive life. Even in an ordinary home, four brothers living under the same roof, under the same parental protection, cannot have the same sense of satisfaction at the same table even for a single day of the year. Any menu of preparations will certainly give some dissatisfaction to some of them. When thus four distinct entities cannot have equal satisfaction out of the same table, how can the four personalities in a man ever gain a complete satisfaction in the tussle and contention of the same set of dissipating external circumstances? And yet, the world, in its haste and blind to the inner constitution of man, is in all hurry-burry, fretting and fuming, killing and looting, to bring about constitutions after constitutions for the happiness of man. But at all their efforts, failure alone grins at them again and again. But at all their efforts, failure alone grins at them again and again. The material world of secular sophistry is today standing ashamed of itself, extremely sad and completely destitute in the violence of the life, stranded, degraded, mobbed, and polluted. The blind worshippers of superficial facts and figures alone can dare hope to reclaim life from its present destitution through materialism. Anyone who is slightly above the average in intelligence and vision in the world of today is feeling instinctively that the great experiment of materialism has definitely foundered once and forever. to drag man's boat of hope out of the sands and set it again on the mainstream of existence in now the function of is now the function of true religion. Joy seekers. Certainly, every one of you will admit that what we seek in life is peace and joy. The way of seeking and the field in which we are seeking may be different from man to man, from place to place, and from era to era. But all of us are demanding the same everywhere and at all times. Joy and peace, as generally understood, is that which we experience when, in the external circumstances, we come to live a pattern of things which we have demanded for ourselves at a given period of time and place. That which was in our childhood a great happiness and joy may not again provide for us an equal happiness or peace in our youth. A blue glass marble or a tennis ball would have been joyous presents when one was in one's childhood. But the same presents would not bring any happiness to us if they are presented to us at our diamond jubilee. Conversely, they may even be painful, inasmuch as they would remind us of our old age and the impending calamitous day. Examples can be multiplied to justify the working definition of joy and peace that we made just now. In this, the difficulty of the failure of man is mainly because the demand of the physical man is not necessarily the demand of the mental, and in the same individual, the intellectual personality would still have a third type of demand, and perhaps the spiritual seeker in him would have yet another demand. Thus, four distinct sets of demands are made by each individual at the same period of time and space. Certainly, no two happenings can come to pass at one and the same time and place, the happenings being conditioned by both time and place. Therefore, however much we may try to bring about through certain new changes a perfect scheme of things in our life and a hope to gain out of it a perfect satisfaction for all the four personalities in us, we shall only end up with sheer disappointment. Our move. But if there be a technique by which we can train, discipline, and integrate all these wild and madly resulting personalities in us together into one unit, certainly we can therefore thereafter order much more freedom and happiness for ourselves in our outer world. These techniques are together meant by the term religion used by the great seers. What this technique is and how to accomplish it is the main burden of the Upanishads, the sacred book of the Hindus. What is the constitution and nature of man, and how he should view himself and the world outside, in short, how he would act as the right experiencer correctly experiencing the true objects to be experienced is the secret core of all Upanishads. I am sure that I have now made it amply clear how far your inquiry, how far our inquiry would be interesting and fruitful not only to ourselves but to the world at large. In case we undertake this work in a pure spirit of research and scholarship, I do not want your devotion for the ancient scriptures to be brought into this Yajnashala, the hall where the spiritual discourses are held continuously for a fixed length of time till the text is over is called Yajnashala. To stultify or color your poor discrimination, bundle it up, come here with a sharp and pointed intelligence, thirsty to know and willing to strive. Introduction. Religion, the science of life. Religion is not for the animals. Among the buffaloes and the tigers, we have no religion. Religion is the remedy of the particular unrest felt by man, even when he is fully equipped with all the best in life. Religion is the technique by which an individual gets his mind and intellect trained to grasp and understand the larger themes of the universe and its own exact place in it. To the materialistic who claim that religion is an extravagant luxury of the rich, there is no perceptible need felt within, and so they need no intellectual theory. Spiritual surroundings spiritual surroundings or divine endeavors for the satisfaction of their sense of spiritual unrest. Religion serves mainly the evolved ones who have the intelligence to watch life as a whole while they are living their own personal life and who have the discrimination to feel the imperfection of it all and who have the cultural energy to seek and regain a greater and satisfying perfection. Unless the impatience felt by the individual at the sorry scheme of the things outside and within himself is acute, he will not seek the way to grow out of that state of affairs. To the seekers, religion points out the way, and in this sense, the Hindu religion is a perfect science of self perfection, comprising in it of a complete technique. Now, an important question comes up: what compels some of us to have this spiritual unrest while others have not? The Shastras attribute it to the evolution and growth of the individual, and in this we shall find that Vedanta starts where Darwin's theory ends, in a visionary promise that man will still grow to the final stage of evolution, supermanhood. To Darwin, the chronology of the fossils gave a glimpse of the development and growth of the organisms, and on the basis of it, he evaluated that class and classified the living things. To him, the vegetable life is higher than the inert life of the rocks. The animal life is more evolved than the vegetable kingdom, and among the animals, the most perfect and potent so far evolved is man with his intellect. Thereafter, he leaves us within a grand vision of a greater generation of supermen. If to Darwin the measures of development were the amount of intelligence exhibited by each being and the perfections of their structures, the measuring rod to the spiritual master of the Upanishads was the quantity of awareness and consciousness manifest through a given physical and mental equipment. In the world of men, certainly all of us have not the same sensitiveness to react readily to the world outside or to the quality of our thoughts and emotions. Some of us exhibit an utter incapacity to be fully aware of the outer circumstances. There are many among us who cannot dispassionately analyze and discriminate our own inner weaknesses. Such of us are indeed only two legged animals according to the science of Vedanta. They are only the serpent men, the scorpion men, the tiger men, etc. They have not come to the full stature of manhood. Thus viewed, the Vedantic teachers have classified all men other than the mineral men into three groups: the animal man, the man man, and the superman. The animal man stage is the dull, insensitive stage of least awareness. The men of this stage constitute the slaves, the underdogs, the sensuous, the unprincipled atheists. To them, religion and spiritual practices are meaningless since they are no better in the quantity of awareness in them than the cow in their backyard. Some of them evolve into the next higher stage of a greater awareness, a man stage. These constitute the religion and the three religious and true seekers. Our Shastras call this type of men as the adhikaris, meaning the fit ones for spiritual life. Who is fit? When I say adhikaris, I am not repeating the word in the connotation if in which it has come to be used by the orthodoxy, who made use of it to keep us all, including themselves, in complete darkness regarding the sacred wealth of knowledge contained in our scriptures. It is this foolish policy that has brought about the Hindu decadence, the priest class, or a bygone past, probably when there was a mighty era of ecclesiastic, ecclesiastical government ministered Mother Shruti's intentions and successfully created a community of Vedantins and a vast community of ignorant mules out of the glorious Aryan stock. As time passed on, when the majority of the Hindus were ignorant of the real science of religion, the priest class also, grown indolent in their riches, stopped themselves getting educated in the scriptural textbooks. Thus, we both the priest class as well as the laity came to live a tradition of ignorance with its concomitant superstitions. It is the tradition of ignorance that gave power to a priest class to decide who are fit for spiritual life and who are unfit. Certainly, this is an absurd proposition. It is not in the hands of one ignorant, imperfect mortal to judge the mental and intellectual qualities of a seeker and come to measure his spiritual thirst. All of us educated in the modern colleges who have a capacity to think for ourselves have an awakened intellect, a heart of abiding emotions, a balanced character, and an adventurous spirit to live the higher values of life are all fit vehicles to enter the spiritual kingdom. An atom bomb secret certainly needs an army with all its ammunitions to guard it. But such guardians are not needed for the eternal wisdom of the Upanishads. It is neither your nor my responsibility to guard it. Mother Shruti herself guards every Jnana Yajna the halls of learning where the spiritual texts are taught need no gatekeeper. The unworthy will be shunted away from the very atmosphere of such a sacred and divine study. Even if unauthorized members walk into the halls, they will not be able to hear the great secret, for in such an atmosphere surcharged with divine and subtle vibrations, a gross animal man cannot keep awake for long. I am not exaggerating. Go to any assembly where spiritual discourses are given, and you will find at least a couple of persons leaning on the walls or to the pillars and conspicuously snoring away all through the satsang. Addressing these men, the Shruti, in extreme kindness, advises them not to waste their time attending such satsangs, but to go out to any field of dynamic work and thus gain the necessary inner qualities which will make them fit to profit by the discourses. It is only the lust and personal ambition of man that gave the wrong interpretation to the Shruti. This much I have to elaborate because after the announcement of the yajna, I had been receiving letters from the Orthodox section two of the Hindus expressing their anxiety at my outrageous folly, according to some of them, by teaching Vedanta freely to all and sundry. I am molesting the purity of our Shrutis. From the above, it is clear that the interpretation of the intolerant orthodoxy are baseless, and the Hindu Renaissance can no longer wait upon these meager excuses. Every intelligent man of culture and mental purity has a right to the great heritage of our rishis. Hinduism minus Vedanta is only a dead religion. Vedanta contains the cream of all human experiences. They have been formulated after close observations of the outer and the inner lives of man, not at a given period of history, but through generations of teachers and disciples. Such a great wealth of knowledge cannot be the personal property of either of individuals or a community or a nation. Vedanta is the commonwealth of man, and every full grown man who has started asking questions upon the logic of creation, the goal of life, the state of perfection, etc., has the right of free access to it, irrespective of his caste, creed, or nationality, age, or stage in life. The technique we have mentioned earlier from the man stage to grow out and evolve as a superman. Vedanta gives us certain scientific techniques. All religions in the world, in their fundamental rituals, provide sufficient technique in evolving the animal man to the man stage. In their higher practices of discrimination, ethical and moral living, detachment, and higher meditation, we have the total scheme by adopting which from the man stage an individual can consciously hasten his own evolution to supermanhood. To the materialists to whom life is an illogical and meaningless procession from the womb to the tomb, there is no urge felt for self improvement. There is no perfection to be achieved or any goal to be gained. To them, indeed, religion is an opiate of or the people, a conspiracy of the rich, a diabolic extravagance of public money, public time, and public wealth, etc. This would indeed be the opinion of the buffalo world also, if only we try to preach religion to them. The greatness of man, justifying him to claim himself to be the roof and crown of things, is in this that he also can consciously grow and come to claim the bliss and perfection of the highest evolution. The vegetable and animal kingdoms have will have to wait till Mother Nature takes them into her hands and brings them out through better molds of the higher evolutions. The methods of which man can consciously evolve are the methods described in the spiritual life. In the lower scales of evolution, beings exist and act by instincts under the compelling force of the urge to preserve themselves. The self preservation instinct, kill, loot, steal, but preserve yourself, seems to be the law of life in the lower kingdoms. But having become man, nature seems to tell him that he can no longer grow if if he leaves the religion of the animals. Fight down the instincts. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not loot, thou shalt not steal. Even at the point of death, suffer it meekly, but heroically, and yet leave all the higher principles of life, but yet leave not the higher principles of life, such as love, tolerance, kindness, mercy, etc. This seems to be the only avenue through which man can enter the kingdom of his fulfillment and claim the bliss and peace of supermanhood. that as an organism, man has become physically the perfect in is the unanimous opinion of all physiologists. The next stage of growth is inward. There is a lot of animalistic grossness and instinct clogs in our head and heart, which are to be purified in order to bring about a great amount of awareness of consciousness manifest through the inner equipments of man. All methods by which this is achieved are spiritual, be it in Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, or Buddhism. The key to open. When once the mind and intellect have been cleansed of their grossness and made still of all their agitations, the individual comes to experience and rediscover the state of pure awareness, which is the state of perfection, most dynamic and potent, visualized by all the religions. The word that cries Vedanta repeatedly and denies for us any reality in our present many misconception about mantras, about ourselves. It is something like an emperor waiting outside his own locked palace gate in the cold and dark threats of the wintry night. In his drunkenness, the king has forgotten that in his own pocket is the key and that he has every right to open the door and walk within into the warmth, splendor, and joy of his own palace halls. The scriptures, like the attendants of the king, are repeatedly appealing to us, reminding us that our sorrows of life will all end if only we take the key that is in us and open the doors and walk in to our own palace. But in our giddiness with vanity and self forgetfulness, born out of the bleeding ulcers of animalism in us, we have today neither ears nor to hear, nor the good sense to seek, nor the courage to open the gates of our own kingdom and walk in to claim our heritage as the sole monarch of it. Thus, religious life starts when one, by intelligently living the experiences of life, comes to feel the imperfections of one's own warm existence. Atmakrupa, according to our Shastras, is the last gate to the temple of spiritualism. But unfortunately, the sick hurry and divided aims of our materialistic world give us no mental or intellectual rest to estimate life and come to feel the completeness of it all. From desire to desire, we are whipped along to groan down the path of like the path of life towards the abysm of death. Towards the abysm of death, earning and spending, acquiring and hoarding. We lay waste our powers, ever seeking but never finding an unbroken and perfect state of peace and joy. The more the materialism encroaches upon our divine nature, the more we shall get into the kingdom of the animal, and the farther away shall we thereby move from the bliss of perfection, which is the true and rightful heritage of man. Man's eternal nature is bliss. Bliss alone is his Swarupa, that thou art, and not this. An intellectual, tearful, ineffectual, tearful creature is the repeated assertion of the Vedantic masters, who were all established in their own subjective experience of this great truth. Why the sorrow? I can see, my friends, a great question rising in your minds. But how it is, Swami, that if our nature is happiness, we are continuously unhappy and sorrow ridden? The answer is obvious. We are not knowing and behaving as we are. We are neither aware of the outer world of things, nor are we living in the awareness of our own inner world. Life is a series of experiences lived by us from moment to moment in living one experience. We must have three things: the subject, the object, and the relationship between these two. In our ignorance of ourselves, we miscalculate and accordingly evaluate the outer world of things and thus come to entertain a false relationship. It is this that causes all our sorrows. In fact, the outer world of things is inert and cannot of themselves cause us either joy or sorrow. But shame on us, we allow them to tyrannize us over us by lending our own strength to them. A man, while taking his bath in the Ganges, saw a bright thing floating down the stream. He swam to it and caught hold of it. He saw that it was a Malacca cane with a silver top. Along with the cane, while swimming back, he was caught in a dangerous whirl and lost his hold upon the newly gained stick. The stick floated down the river stream. The man, on reaching the banks, was seen to be bitterly weeping for the loss of his cane. The cane that came down the stream would have continued its progress without causing this man any sorrow of its own accord, but on going and claiming it as his. And thereafter, when he lost the stick, it felt him wounded in heart. It was only the relationship that he fixed up between himself and the stick, and gave the stick the potency and the strength to wound him. Thus, in life too, we, in our ignorance of the nature of ourselves and the nature of the things around us, come to maintain a false sense of relationship, which gives us our bitter quota or sorrow and pain. Tomorrow we shall try to analyze and understand the nature of our own spiritual, physical personality. A correct understanding of the subject alone can guide us to fix its relationship with the various objects it comes across. Personality of man. So far, we tried to gain a bird's eye view of the scheme of life and nature of our experiences in the world. We found that life itself is a series of experiences both to the materialistics and to the spiritualists, but there is a vast difference. The materialists believe that life started in an accidental birth and it ends in an equally uncertain point called death. To them, each individual is an arrow that came from darkness into their flush of life, flying across it towards darkness again. To those who feel that this is sufficient explanation of our existence, the philosophy of life would naturally be eat, drink, and be merry, for we know not what is there beyond the grave. On the other hand, spiritualists are those who believe that life is a continuous process with a set purpose, a glorious pattern, and a rigid logic. The life which each one of us is living today is an effect, and since every effect must have a cause, our lives also must have had their independent causes, even though those causes are not perhaps perceptible to us today. To the faithful and truly intelligent, the present life is therefore one of the numberless incidents in our eternal existence. To such folks, life has a definite purpose and a desirable goal. We have found how even the science problems of the West had continuously of the West has unconsciously expressed this truth in their logical estimates of their objective experiments. Darwin visualizes a generation of supermen. The great rishis of the Upanishads explain to us that life, which is a series of challenges met, is to be lived for the purpose of improving ourselves to reach the state of supermanhood. We also saw that an experience is possible only when the experiencer and the experienced, the subject and the object, maintain a relationship between each other. Today we shall try to understand the nature of the experiencer. Physiology considers man as a physical structure with a brain having the capacity to think and feel. The spiritual physical structure of man is visualized and estimated by the Eastern saints of the old, goes beyond the theme of the Western biologists. The theory propounded by the Vedantic seers is diagrammatically represented in page 21. Spiritual physical structure: Om, intellectual sheath, mental sheath, vital air sheath, food sheath. Bliss sheath, microcosm, Vishwa, Tejas, Pradnya, gross body, subtle body, causal body. Virat, Hiranyagarbha, Ishvara, macrocosm. Personality of man, a diagrammatic representation of the ever expanding sense of limitation arising out of our ignorance and the consequent false identifications with matter envelopments. It is well known that mere physical body will not move, grow, or act unless the life principle presides over it. A dead body can no more smile, eat, or walk, think, or feel. When one's life has flown out, the body falls down and in a short time starts decomposing into the very elements from which it had it had come. This is true, however great the man might have been while he was alive. This life center in us, in each one of us, is the sacred spot from which all activities emanate. If that life center is not in this Swami, from this very moment onwards, he would end all discourses for all times. You are all now listening to these words, mentally analyzing them, and intellectually understanding the same. None of these actions would have been possible if the life is not vitalizing your body, mind, and intellect. The divine spark of life, the spiritual center, called the Atman in Vedanta, is considered to have been enveloped by the various layers of matters of various degrees of grossness. The outermost shell, the grossest, is the body, and we almost all through our conscious existence outermost shell, the grossest, all through our conscious existence, go about conceiving ourselves to be only this body. Very rarely, a few of us may be aware of the existence of our mental and intellectual personalities, and indeed, probably none of us is even remotely conscious of the vital all center of all life and bliss in us. The Atman or the Self is represented in the diagram by the sacred mystic symbol Om. This our self, our real nature, is omnipotent and omniscient. This spark of life has come to be, in a sense, developed by matter, and the various envelopments are called in Vedanta as sheaths. The word sheath indicates that indicates that just as the sword and its sheath have no contact, so too between the eternal divine spark of life and the matter there is no contact. It only indicates that in the presence of the spirit alone, the matter covering gains similitude of life. There are thus five distinct sheaths The food sheath, the outermost, the vital air sheath, lining it internally, the mental sheath within, and still interior, the intellectual sheath, and lastly, the subject of all, the bliss sheath. Before we go into a minute study of the composition and nature of the various sheaths, let me explain to you the philosophical implications of the term interior. When we say that one sheath is interior to the other, we only mean that the inner one is subtler than the outer. Again, the subtlety of a sheath is measured by its pervasiveness. Say, for example, we have got 4 cubic inch piece of ice. The area that it would cover is definite, but when it is melted, the water so formed can be spread out into a larger area, and hence we could in philosophy say that water is subtler than ice. Supposing now we heat the water to its boiling point, then the steam so formed can spread itself out in the entire atmosphere of the room, and so we consider steam subtler than water. Similarly, the physical body is the grossest. The vital air that we take in can be blown out to pervade a greater area than which it occupied by the body. So we consider the vital air sheath as subtler than the gross food sheath. Our mind can certainly reach a distant place where our breath cannot reach, and our intellect can, in its vision, certainly reach places where our mind has never earlier dared to peep in. Thus, we consider the mental and the intellectual sheaths as more and more subtle than their outer sheaths. The subtlest, thus, is the Atman, and it envelops all, and none envelops it. It is all pervading, says the Shrutis. We shall now try to study the composition of the various sheaths. The food sheath, that physical body which every one of us is fully aware of during our waking state of consciousness, is termed as the food sheath. It is called so because it has come up from the essence of the food taken by the Father. It exists because of the food taken in, and ultimately after death, it must go back to become food again. The substance of the physical nature structure arising from food, existing in food, and going back to be food, naturally is termed most appropriately as the food sheath. The organs of knowledge and the organs of action exist in this sheath. The vital air sheath, the air that we breathe in, we all know gets mixed up with the blood and reaches every cell of the physical body. Even without much imagination, we can easily see how the oxygen of the air that we breathe in constantly forms an inner silk lining, as it were, from the outer physical gross sheath. The vital air sheath controls all the organs of action, and according to the different functions it performs, the science of Vedanta has classified it under 5 different names. The Pancha Prana. Panchaprana, we may consider them as corresponding to the five physiological systems that the biologists describe. Prana, the system of perception, it controls all perceptions of the fivefold stimuli received from the outer world. Apana, system of excretion, all things thrown out of the body, seeds, spit, perspiration, urine, stools, etc., are expressions of this prana. Vyana, system of digestion, the digestion of food received in the stomach. Samana, circulatory system, that power by which the digested food is justly conveyed to the various limbs of the body by the blood stream. And Udana, system of thinking, the capacity in an individual to raise his thoughts from the present level to conceive a possibility or appreciate a new principle, etc., is also a play of the prana. The mental sheath. None of us is entirely aware of the existence of a mind in us. Mind is that seat in us which entertains our doubts, joys, and the like emotions, and which constantly erupts into the non-stop flow of the thought lava. Mind is the doubting element, while intellect is the determining factor in each of us. Mind can go on its flights to things and places seen or heard, but because of its vast reaches, it is considered subtler than all its outer envelopments we have explained above. The intellectual sheath. In fact, in the Vedantic literature, very often we find that the mind and intellect are considered one and the same. Intellect is mind which has come to a determined decision or a willed judgment. The intellect is considered subtler than the mind because it adventures forth into realms farther than what it had heard or seen before. The hitherto inexperienced are the fields of its pleasures, and hence we consider the intellect to be a sheath interior to that of the mind. The bliss sheath. This is the sheath made up of negativity or ignorance in which we exist during our deep sleep state of consciousness. It is considered blissful because whatever be the condition of in which individuals are in their waking and dream states, once they reach the halls of sleep, be they rich or poor, successful or disappointed, healthy or sick, young or old, all of them experience the same undisturbed peace and bliss. To the ordinary gross intellect, this sheath is an unconscious state of nothingness, meaning nothing of those things known to it as things. In this deep sleep state of consciousness, man is experiencing a joyous condition wherein none of his known experiences are repeated, but all the same, the joy felt is positively known. The subtlest of all is the life center in us, which is the core of this sheathed structure. The five layers of matter discussed above, along with the eternal life center as its core, together constitute the spiritual physical structure of you and me. The clearer and purer the mental and intellectual sheets, the greater is the manifested consciousness exhibited by the organism. The mind and intellect are almost absent in stone life, and we see no awareness in them at all. In the plant life, Vedanta claims a rudimentary mind and intellect, and hence in that kingdom we see a perceiving of awareness in comparison with the dull and inert state of the stone life. Much more clear and developed is the mind and the intellect of the animals, and so they are definitely more aware. The supreme development, of course, is in man. The purer the mind and intellect, the brighter the beams of consciousness that shoot out from that individual, and the saint or the prophet is he who has the maximum awareness manifest in him. The Shruti says that the knower of Brahman becomes the Brahman, Brahmavid Brahmaiva Bhavati. To realize the pure awareness, which is the Atman or the life center, is the goal of life, the culmination of evolution, the fulfillment of supermanhood. Though we are in reality this life center alone, we, in a misunderstanding of our real nature, superimpose our identity on one or the other of the outer envelopments grown into the three bodies and claim to ourselves the different individualities. The ego that arises in us when we identify with the physical body is called the Vishwa, with the subtle body is called the Tejas, and the causal body the Pradnya. For details, read discourses on Mandukya with Gaudpadas Karika. Thus, at one moment we are the body, as when they say, I have grown dark, or I am a Brahmin, or I am short, etc. At another moment, we identify ourselves with our mind, as when we say, I am doubtful, I am agitated, or I am worried, etc. And at yet another time, we consider ourselves to be the intellect, as when we say, I am dull, or I have an idea, etc. It seems that there is a crowd in which one of us, thus identifying ourselves to be one or the other of the matter envelopments, we play the fool and come to suffer the consequent sense of limitations, sorrows, and unrest. In this sense, samsara is our own creation, and so the entire responsibility for our limitations and sorrows lies with us only. Although we live within each of us the above described madness and confusion of personalities, it is universally noticeable that every one of us is ready to sacrifice the outer for the satisfaction of the inner sheets. For example, let us suppose that a man has a painful ulcer in his forearm, giving him unending tortures of the mind. A doctor approaches him and advises that he must get his arm amputated. The Patient really allows his gross body to be chopped off so that he may cure the agitations of the mind. In another instance, when the religious or political ideal has taken possession of one's intellect, that revolutionary is ready to suffer any amount of physical discomfort and even mental torture in order to preserve the conviction of his intellect. That is to say, when he identifies himself with his intellect in order to satisfy the inner sheath, he is ready to float and completely ignore the demands and claims of his outer sheaths. When once we have followed closely our arguments so far, we can easily understand the state of mind of the great prophets and masters when they, after discovering their real nature to be the Atman, readily ignores and suffers all their sheaths even to the ripped open alive, to be ripped open alive. A Christ persecuted and put on the cross would sincerely pray to the Lord in all forgiveness and charity, Lord, forgive them, they know not what they do. Or a Mahatma in our own times could crumble down with bullets in his chest singing Ram Ram. We read in history that during Alexander's victorious march along the plains of India, he met a great master in North India who cared not to pay obeisance to the temporal victor, for which the saint was ordered by the king to be put in jail. The next day, Alexander went to the cage and, introducing himself as the victorious emperor, commanded the saint to ask of him any boon. The saint, it is reported, looked up at the monarch's face and, in withering contempt, with a serenity born out of true wisdom, replied, "You are obstructing the sun's light. Please move away a little. This is all the boon I ask of thee." This illustrates the joy of fulfillment in a true saint and his mental equipoise in all conditions. Discovery of the self is not only the ending of all our confusions and sense of imperfections, but it is at once an ascent to a state of supermanhood or godhood. The dream of the Upanishadic seers was of a nation of Hindus, every one of them a superman, a master of circumstances and happenings around and within him. How each one of us can accomplish this is the theme of the Upanishads, the spiritual ritual in which our false animal values of life are offered as oblations into the well lit fires of our discrimination is Jnana Yajna. We are now riddled with lower values because we identify ourselves with the matter envelopments and view life through these distorting media. How we can now withdraw our identifications with the outer envelopments and turn inward, as it were, in a spirit of self discovery, can be the theme of tomorrow's talk. You may wonder why we should know all these details. Is it not sufficient if I do as I am told? Asks a brother seeker. Friends, faith, no doubt, is a great and mighty ally to the seeker, but blind faith, born of fear and thriving in ignorance, is a chain of slavery. Knowledge lends an age to and direction for sadhana and helps us to do our pilgrimage with jet plane comfort, torpedo precision, and rocket speed. The subtle body. While describing the spiritual physical structure of man, we went into the details of the five different sheets. They are again, for convenience of study, divided into three bodies: the gross, the subtle, and the causal. The food and the vital air sheets together constitute the gross body, while the mental and the intellectual sheets constitute the subtle body, and the bliss sheath is called the causal body. Of these, it is the subtle body that is the instrument for all sadhaks to obtain in obtaining self perfection. All religions aim at the integration of the subtle body, and every ritual is an exercise in strengthening and shaping the fibers of the subtle body. In order that we may come to understand the scientific implication of this plane, we must have an intimate knowledge of the structure and nature of the subtle body. In Vedanta, mind and intellect are often considered as one whole because the stuff that remained the same when we are in a doubting state of confusion. We are in the mental sheath, and when we, with reference to our previous experiences and knowledge, come to a firm determination and a definite judgment, we are said to be in the intellectual sheath. If thus the mind is the very substance of the subtle body, the complete knowledge of the nature of the mind would be a complete knowledge of the subtle body. Friends, you all know that there is mind working in you. You often say, my mind is bad, etc. But have you ever thought, what is the mind? Now, I want you all to leave your passive habit of merely listening to what the speaker says and think independently for yourself. This, in fact, is meditation supreme. What is the mind? Thoughts cannot be the mind because the quality, nature, and identity of our thoughts never remain the same, although we feel that our mind is ever the same. If thoughts were the mind, if wo- it would have changed as often as our thoughts. Nor can the mind be desire because desire has no existence apart from thoughts. nor can our Shastras are much more direct for their crystalline clarity of expression, completeness of exposition, thoroughness of explanation. No scientific literature in the world has yet come to compete with the perfections gained in these lines by the Hindu Shastras in the hands of the Rishis. According to our Shastras, thought is but a manifestation of the mind, but the mind itself is a delusory nothing, similar, seemingly conspicuous, a delusory something created when thoughts flow. This is better understood if we take the example of a river. The river is not water, nor is it water with two banks. A river is there where water flow. The waters flow. The flowing is the essence of the river. Similarly, thoughts are not the mind, but thoughts flowing one after another is an unbroken continuity. In an unbroken continuity creates a delusory something called the mind. And this mind threatens us, nay, even governs over us, persecuting us with its low demands, animal instincts, and vicious urges, or at some moments with its higher demands of divine calls and spiritual urges, cultivating the mind. The control to control and develop this mind and bring it within our hold is the secret of all personality development. He who is a master of his mind is a master of the whole world, is the master of the world. Mastery over the situations in life without a mastery over the mind would be a mere vain dream.